bring Giles Kenningham into the conversation now. He's a former Director of Communications at 10 Downing Street and the host of a podcast called Hacks and Flacks, which is a lot of fun. Giles, lovely to see you this morning.
Good to see you.
Now, I had to double-take when I saw the front page of the Sunday Telegraph. Starmer piles praise on Thatcher to woo the right. And he's written an op-ed for the newspaper, which, let's be honest, it's no secret, it's right-leaning. And this op-ed basically says, you know, voters have been betrayed on Brexit and immigration. I stand ready to deliver. So Starmer channeling his inner Maggie. Is this credible, Giles? What's your reaction to this?
I mean, look, let's see it for what it is. It is naked, transparent move to park his tanks on Tory lawn, on the Tory lawn. And I think we've got to see the backdrop of this. There is a spectre of a potential general election in May. Labour haven't got many policies they've rolled out. So they're trying to do that pitch to Middle England. Do I think it's going to move the dial? No. I think what's interesting about all of this is I do not think there's going to be a general election in May, but I think the Tories have done it as a trap for Labour to try and force them to take some policy positions.
Yes.
Because clearly Starmer's stance was like, I'll do nothing, I'll sail under the radar, and I'll be none of the above.
Yeah.
And so I will get into power. But I don't think Labour are now going, shit, do we need to get these policies out the door really, really quickly? And they haven't got them ready, they're not bomb-proof, so therefore you've got them trying to make these sort of, pitches to different parts of the electorate.
I'm just going to make a little apology for your fruity language there, Giles, but no worries. It's a Sunday morning. We're all getting excited because an election is imminent. The other thing about Starmer, of course, is this idea that he seems to have decided to just go fully centrist, if not a little bit blue Labour. He doesn't seem to care about some of the hard left elements of his party. I mean, the idea of channeling Thatcher isn't going to go down very well with them. I mean, they think that Thatcher's like the most evil figure of the 20th century. And you say it's not going to move the dial, but aren't the Tories worried that there is no jeopardy with Starmer as there was with Corbyn? You know, people on the streets of Britain probably agree with that op-ed. Nothing seems to be working. You know, we're all going to hell in a handcart. And maybe they are thinking, they're not thinking like Blair, hooray, we want Tony in the same way, but they are thinking, Starmer, how bad could it be?
I think so, but I think like neither the Tories or the Labour have actually set out what the big idea is, what the big vision is. And I think for Starmer there has to be some substantive policies. Yes, he's making the right noises. Yes, he's continuing to detoxify the Labour Party. And it's interesting he talks about Thatcher and entrepreneurialism because for Labour, their weakest sort of policy is the economy. They're still not trusted on that, so he's doing a lot to try and detoxify. But at the end of the day, we still haven't seen any substantive policies from them on this matter.
From your experience working in Number 10, this whole kind of silent assassin routine, just soundbite over substance, they don't need to say anything until the manifesto, just let the Tories hang themselves. That's not a bad strategy, is it? Because they're still ahead 20 points in the polls.
But mid-term polls are soft. And remember, I think Starmer's got to get a bigger swing than Blair got in 97.
Yes.
So I actually think the most likely outcome, probably at the moment looking at the polls, is going to be a Lib coalition rather than Labour majority.
Goodness.
And bear in mind, he's got a hope.
Will the Libs go into coalition again? I mean, they wouldn't go into coalition with the Tories, but maybe they would Labour.
It feels like they're much more ideologically left-leaning and much more sort of aligned with
some Lib Dems seem to be more left-wing than Keir Starmer, to be fair. Let's talk about more cash for Kigali now. The Sunday Times front page. Rwanda's extra 15 million to seal migration. I appreciate 15 million is a lot of quid to anybody watching or listening to this. In fact, to either of us, I wouldn't mind 15 million quid. But it's not a lot of money in the scheme of things. However, won't voters just think, why are you throwing more money at this thing? You know, it's not working. These flights aren't going to take off. Should they just ditch the Rwanda policy, Giles?
I don't think they can. This has become the Tories' new Europe. It's the big political headache for Sunak, and some of this is about party management, but you've seen lots of reports in the paper today saying it's existential for Sunak.
Yes.
Lots of MPs are putting in letters of no confidence in. I think cleverly got off to a bit of a shaky start with the Times interview where he said Rwanda wasn't essentially a number one policy for him and the Home Office, which upset a lot of the Tory right wing.
End all, he said.
So I think, they're going to have to find a way to cut through this. And clearly, the whole issue of the boats, immigration, uncontrolled immigration is still coming up in focus groups. I mean, interestingly, Starmer mentions it in his op-ed today.
Yes.
So you see they've got to try and get a handle on this.
Labour have got the answers on immigration, yet we're yet to hear any of them. You used to work for David Cameron. I'm intrigued to know what you think Cameron, as Foreign Secretary, might make of the Rwanda plan, because it doesn't seem to be the kind of thing that he would support.
I think he said that unless you've got a better idea, then don't sniped from the sidelines. I think when
well,
he was
not an overwhelming endorsement.
When he was in government, he talked about getting immigration down to the tens of thousands, which we didn't succeed with. I think ostensibly he wouldn't have come back into the fold if he didn't support this, and I think he's been pretty sort of vocal and straightforward on it.
Isn't there a problem with him coming back into the fold that he makes Rishi Sunak look slightly less prime ministerial? I mean, he is a good and competent statesman, isn't he, Cameron? He's done this op-ed in The Sun on Sunday. He said, only unity, strength and resilience will calm our dangerous world. I mean, that's the sort of rhetoric that the Prime Minister should be coming out with, really. I
mean, I think ultimately he is an asset for Sunak. When Cameron was Prime Minister, he had Haig as the Foreign Secretary, who would sit round for all those big decisions. And often, many problems in politics come full circles. To have someone who's been there, seen it, done it, who can offer you the sage advice is really useful. And bear in mind also, Haig wasn't jockeying for position. He didn't want to become Prime Minister.
Yes.
I don't think Cameron wants to become Prime Minister. He's been there and done that. I suppose the question for the Tories is, does just by the very fact that he is a very good media performer, he looks Prime Minister or he is good on the world stage, does he start to overshadow Sunak?
Yeah.
And the question for them will be, how much do they use him during a general election campaign?
But he's a great campaigner, though.
Yeah, I suspect they will use him quite a lot, yeah.
I mean, OK, we can say that he didn't campaign adequately on Brexit and Remain, because obviously Leave won. And in many respects, some of his closest allies, I think, are still frustrated that he walked away in 2016. But at the same time, I think they probably will put him on the campaign trail. And again, he may overshadow his boss, so to speak. I mean, physically, there's a discrepancy there which doesn't play very well in photographs.
There was that picture which got a lot of publicity, wasn't it? Him walking alongside Sunak and Cleverly, and he was the tallest. And in the middle, which everyone said made him look more prime ministerial.
Yeah, I thought so. But they just need to get the optics right on it, presumably. He's also made the point that we can't forget the situation in Ukraine, which I think is valid. I
think also interesting there, he talks about strengthening ties with the US, which is interesting, the backdrop of obviously we've had quite a rocky relationship under Biden. Obviously Johnson didn't get on with him very well. There was no love lost there. Do we still have that special relationship? But he talks it up, so he's going there. And also interesting, talks about the importance of NATO.
Although some might find that a bit ironic, because he was accused of cozying up too much to Barack Obama, who's obviously a Democrat president, rather than maintaining ties with the Republicans. I mean, the Tories should have good relationship with the Republican movement.
With both.
That seems to have eviscerated over the course of the last few years. Having said that, so perhaps as the Republican Party...
I think they're going to have to, with the spectre of a Trump, potentially of a Trump presidentship coming in.
But I know, but I mean, Cameron going to be comfortable going out and meeting Trump? He'll have to do that if the time comes that this guy is re-elected. It could be interesting.
Yeah, I think he's pragmatic, so...
Right, no, fair enough. Let's talk about the Telegraph, as we're calling it, shakedown. I love what we've done there. My colleague Janet Daly has come out against the idea of the UAE having ownership of the newspaper by paying back this loan that the Barclay brothers have to Lloyds Bank. The headline of her piece is, "This paper's proposed takeover by a state must not be allowed to happen." And I'm just intrigued with your former number 10 hat on, Giles. I mean, do you think that Rishi Sunak and indeed Culture Secretary Lucy Fraser are going to let the Telegraph of all newspapers fall into the hands of a foreign state that doesn't seem to have that much respect for freedom of the press?
Yeah, I mean, ostensibly you think it would be a crazy move to let another government own a paper. There are many other rival bids which look eminently sensible to own the paper. I think we've got to be very careful in this country what we allow other states to own. And we've seen it with football clubs. It's the ultimate soft power tool, whether it's owning the Saudis, owning Newcastle United. Quite controversial. So yes, do I think they should intervene? Yes, do I think a foreign state should own it? No. Very interesting that you, yourself, and a couple of the columnists have come out and spoken out against it. And it feels like sentiment is certainly moving against this bid.
Well, we live in hope. Let's finally talk about the story that's dominated the headlines all week, Harry and Meghan. So the latest from the Sunday Times, which is also covered on the front of the Mail on Sunday, is this idea that the Duke of Westminster, Hugh Grosvenor, who's a very good friend of both William and Harry, he's getting married in Chester in the summer. It's the society wedding, not just of the year, but the century, because obviously the Duke of Westminster's one of the country's richest men. And he's decided that he'll invite William, but not Harry. I mean, how do you think this whole scandal, if you like, is played out for both the royals and indeed the Sussexes, Giles? I
mean, it almost feels like for Harry and Meghan, they're fighting a war against themselves because the royal family aren't really reacting to a lot of this. I think, essentially, it's a law of diminishing returns for Harry and Meghan. They can have a go once on this. They keep having a go. I think people are going to stop listening. Interestingly, I don't think they poll very well in the UK, so from a PR perspective, can they come back here? And where do they go in the US? They've been dumped by Spotify over that deal. So you sort of see this kind of move to try and become relevant, and the way they've become relevant is becoming shriller and shriller and shriller. I don't think it works.
No, also, I'm wondering whether they've got anything left to say now. You know, the so-called alleged royal racists who questioned Archie's skin tone or a future baby's skin tone have been outed as the King and the Princess of Wales, and yet at the same time most people don't think that it was racist to suggest it in the first place. But secondly, it takes the sting out of any book that Meghan was planning to write or any further revelations. They're sort of, I'm kind of looking at them thinking, what more do you now have to say?
Yeah, they're just looking very bitter instead of actually just standing back and moving on with their lives.
Giles, Kenningham, thank you very much for joining me this morning.